Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Avital Barnea. I'm with the California State Transportation Agency. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our Frequently Asked Questions webinar on the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee. I will be joined today by my colleagues Sequoia Erasmus from the California Transportation Commission and Amar Sid from Caltrans. Just a little bit about our three agencies. You see our logos here on the lower right-hand corner. So CalSTA, my agency, is the cabinet level transportation agency here in the state of California. The California Transportation Commission is one of the departments under the CalSTA umbrella that administers a good chunk of state funding for transportation. And Caltrans is another department under CalSTA that is our state Department of Transportation and the owner of the highway system here in California. So that is a little bit about who we are and who we represent. And let's go to the next slide, please. So there are translation services available for today's webinar. Hopefully you see here on the screen the American Sign Language translator. We also have a Spanish interpretation line. If you would like to dial into the Spanish line, the number here is listed on your screen.
Although we are having a little bit of technical difficulties with our Spanish translation line, which we are getting set up, and it will be together momentarily. So sorry for any inconvenience.
Thank you, Sequoia. All right, next slide, please. So just a little overview of what we are going to go over the next hour in today's webinar. So I'm doing the welcome here for you all. I'm going to hand it over to Sequoia to give an overview of the Equity Advisory Committee. And then we will spend some time answering the questions that were submitted in advance of this webinar. And once we've answered those questions, we should have a good amount of time to take your questions here live in real time, either verbally, or you can put your questions in the chat. And so we'll have some time to answer your live questions, and then we will close out the webinar at 1 o'clock. This webinar is being recorded. We will also post the answers to the questions that are asked on the California Transportation Commission website, as well as the recording, which will be posted there as well. And we just want to remind folks that this is a safe space. We want to encourage you to share information regarding the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee. We want to have meaningful dialogue. We know that this can be a sensitive topic and an emotionally taxing topic, and so we want to remain respectful in this forum, but we are looking forward to spending the next hour with you answering these questions and telling you about the Equity Advisory Committee. Next slide, please.
Before we get going on this one, I want to check and see if our Spanish line is back as going okay.
Hello, I'm here, but I am still in everyone's mind.
Okay. We'll hopefully have Justin and Celeste be able to help get that. And I think afterwards we can have some help recording translating these pieces that we're going to have missed in the beginning, so that our recording that we post has the translation. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we apologize for folks that are trying to tune into the Spanish line. Hopefully we get that fixed soon. So we just wanted to give you a little bit of background to how we got here today with the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee. I'm not going to read everything here that's on the screen, but just by way of background, all three of our agencies have adopted racial equity statements. We started doing this work back in 2019. Caltrans has a racial equity action plan as well. And there's been a lot of work to get to this point. And the formation of this Equity Advisory Committee is something that we see as really putting action behind the words in our equity statement and our Racial Equity Action Plan, and working together to help meet common goals around equity in the state of California. I think that was my last slide, so I am going to hand it over to Sequoia.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Sequoia Erasmus. I serve the California Transportation Commission as the Associate Deputy Director of Equity and Engagement, and I've been working on this team to help move forward our Equity Advisory Committee, and I'm excited to share alongside my co-panelists today as we kick off this process. So the purpose of the Equity Advisory Committee is intended to elevate diverse and historically marginalized voices to advise the Commission, CalSTA, and Caltrans on how to achieve meaningful outcomes in transportation equity, environmental justice, and equitable economic opportunities, especially as related to transportation planning and programming. This purpose has been developed through the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI, the Commission's Equity Advisory Roundtable, which wrapped up last spring, stakeholder feedback, statewide equity listening sessions, which are underway and almost through the first sessions, and interagency collaboration and public feedback. Next slide, please. If you're joining us today and you're curious about the application process and timeline, I want to remind folks that the application submission process is underway. We opened up our application period on August 8th, and it will be closing next week, next Friday, September 2nd at 11:59 p.m. midnight. To apply, we have a form to fill out. It's kind of like a Google form, but through Microsoft. And we have a link that you can access through this website displayed on the screen, or you can use your camera function on a mobile device to utilize this QR code. So you would just open up the camera and it'll come up with like a little yellow line, and you click on it and it'll take you right to the form that you can fill out. Applicants will be notified in early October of their recommendation. And the way that we will be doing this, because we are an interagency committee, is we will be taking recommended application names to the Commission for final approval and adoption. And that will be in mid-October at the meeting of the Transportation Commission. However, applicants will be notified ahead of time that they are being recommended for the adoption. Additionally, sorry, I missed one thing about the application. If you are completing the application, you may notice that the first page has 3 questions in it, and the last question is, do you reside in California? And if you press yes, if you do reside, which this application is open to California residents, then it will give you more questions to fill out and to finalize the application. So we've had a couple of questions about that. So as long as you're a California resident, you'll get the rest of the application when you click yes. Committee membership will consist of up to 15 members serving 2-year staggered terms. And we're going to get into a little more details about what it means to be a member and some of the time commitments that we anticipate later on in this presentation. And just as a reminder, each member must be a resident of California and clearly demonstrate a history of equity-centered personal or professional experience or community leadership, or be actively engaged in transportation equity, policy, programming, advocacy, or related fields such as public health, air quality, climate, housing justice, community development, or socio or economic development. Additionally, we ask that applicants dutifully analyze a possible conflict of interest in participating in this committee. And we will talk further about that, but we will advise specific applicants if if we are not going to recommend them because of any potential conflict of interest through employment or otherwise. So we'll get into that later, but I just wanted to highlight that here as it's going to be a topic of conversation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee is based off of this, the format is based off of this concept graphic that we have here, that in the middle we have the body itself, the Equity Advisory Committee. So up to 15 participants will make up this committee, and they will participate in publicly held quarterly meetings. And those meetings will be kind of in alignment with the way that the California Transportation Commission holds public meetings. They will have agendas posted 10 days in advance. We will have meeting materials. They will be recorded. We will have minutes. We're trying to ensure that public access is centered. Additionally, the committee will provide content for an annual report of recommendations and future outcomes, and that will be kind of the committee's report that they are working on. The committee will be supported by our interagency staff, some of whom you see on the screen right here, and we anticipate holding monthly internal staff meetings to develop meeting agendas and other coordination that reflects committee priorities. And we intend to work with a chair and a co-chair of the committee to determine the agenda and the priorities of the body. And then moving into the last box on the right, the recommendations from the committee will be independently considered by the California State Transportation Agency, the California Transportation Commission, and Caltrans, who, we operate pretty differently, and so we will take the recommendations from the committee and analyze them based on our internal protocols and practices. And that we anticipate holding 2 annual joint agency meetings held kind of in conjunction with Transportation Commission meetings to discuss the committee's annual report, accomplishments, future priority focus areas, and to receive committee updates for staff and or from staff and or committee members. And so that will be about 6 possible meetings a year. And we definitely want to work with the committee to think through that and think through committee members to think through the best way to achieve these goals while managing schedules and things like that. So I want to definitely highlight that as a priority of ours. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into our questions received slide. So these are questions, again, that we received before this webinar, and we'll open it up for open question and answer after we go through these questions.
All right. So I'm going to go over some questions that we received about the logistics of the committee. So we had a few people ask, how often will the committee meet? So we anticipate that the committee will convene 3 to 4 times a year. on their own with support of staff. And then in addition to those 3 to 4 meetings, the committee will also join 2 California Transportation Commission meetings where the entire commission will be present, as well as Caltrans and CalSTA executive leadership. So that comes to about 6 meetings per year. We also received a question, will the meetings take place after regular work hours? So since this work will be informing what we do here during the state, we anticipate that the meetings will take place during regular business hours. However, we are happy to work with you to determine the best way to accommodate members' outside commitments if that ends up posing a challenge. We received a question if the meetings will happen in person or virtually. So these meetings will be held pursuant to the Bagley-Keene Act, which at the moment allows for hybrid meetings, and we anticipate holding hybrid meetings in the future, although we are not sure if that requirement to be able to hold hybrid meetings will continue. That was something that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we still have the ability to meet virtually in a hybrid setting. So we are staying tuned to see if the state legislature is going to make any changes to that requirement. If there is travel required for some or all members of the committee, we have the authority and the budget to pay for that travel in the form of a reimbursement. We received a question if there will be interviews in order for folks to serve on this committee. At this time, we are not planning to do interviews, although if there is a need to interview members, once we've received all the applications, we will discuss that and we will schedule any interviews accordingly. And then finally, we were asked if there will be seats reserved for regional governments on the committee. We do not have any seats reserved for regional governments. However, local and regional government agencies are an important partner in this work, and we may ask them to share information and practices with the committee at public meetings for the committee's consideration. All right, I am going to hand it back over to Sequoia to answer more of the questions we received in advance.
Thank you, Avital. Next slide, please. So the next set of questions refers, we kind of put them in the realm of policy recommendations and accountability. The first and second questions, is there an opportunity to propose policy or legislation through this effort? And what governing body reports will include our recommendations and input? And our response is that recommendations from the committee will inform the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, CAPTI annual report, the California Transportation Commission annual report, as well as several statewide guidelines for transportation plans and programs. The committee will also produce its own annual report detailing priority focus areas and recommendations. The next question, outside of reviews, advice, and recommendations, what, if any, are some of the ways this committee intends to transfer power to the communities? So our response is, one main goal of the establishment of the committee is to create real pathways for members to set meeting priorities, share responsibilities, and determine recommendations to Caltrans, the Commission, and CalSTA. And it is really important to us that members have a clear understanding of how feedback and recommendations will be incorporated into policies, programs, and procedures by each state agency. And all of our agencies will report the progress made in implementing recommendations or justification for not implementing the recommendations from the committee. And finally, are there any statutory requirements that applicants should be aware of? So our response is that this committee, although not required through statute, represents the priorities and collaborations of our 3 agencies, and it was initiated by each of our racial equity statement. And we all, our 3 agencies, identified that the development of an equity advisory committee as a tangible tool to implement meaningful change throughout. And again, the strategy was memorialized in the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure. And sort of a side note that because the body is required to meet pursuant to Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requirements, that members of the committee shall comply with the Political Reform Act and regulations of the Fair Political Practices Commission and all other provisions concerning ethics, conflicts of interest, and incompatible activities. And finally, because our commission adopted the implementation of the committee, we have memorialized it in our own practices. Next slide, please. I'll hand it over to Amar.
Hi, folks. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. So on the scope questions, the first one here, does the Transportation Equity Advisory Committee intend to work with local jurisdictions to help push forward initiatives? If so, and how? So the way we're thinking about this is the work from this committee may influence regional and local transportation agencies' policy development. So for example, topical areas like the Commission's Regional Transportation Plan guidelines or the SB1 competitive program guidelines identify policies and requirements that influence the regional transportation planning process, and also any of the SB1 funding decisions. So from that perspective, I think there may be opportunities to think about this and have conversations with EAC, but not necessarily dictate what we can do with local jurisdictions. For the second question, how will the committee interact with infrastructure investments such as what we're calling IIJA and the implementation of those resources, so the federal infrastructure investments? Again, what we're thinking about here is we want to anticipate all of the kind of respective work that the committee will undertake. So this could include any review, advice, recommendations to transportation specific plans or programs and policies that may be not limited to any of our planning guidelines. So think of like the CTP, the California Transportation Plan, our funding guidelines, the state transportation plans, and any assessments for equitable outcomes within our projects. So this may include the Infrastructure Investments and Job Acts programs at some point, but we're not going to say it's specific to IIJA, and we'll have an opportunity to build this out with what the community determines on their priorities. Let's go to the next slide. The community member well-being. So this question I thought was a really great question. This is something for all of us to be mindful about. Equity work can often be emotionally taxing. What systems do you have in place to ensure that members on the committee are not going to be emotionally exhausted with their contribution? So I think in this space, our interagency teams are really understanding some of the burdens from the equity work or some of the taxation and exhaustion that comes with it, but also really understand like the importance of this work and how vital it is to our space of making those equitable changes. So we want to make sure that again, that we're providing space for the level of expertise that the Transportation Equity Advisory members have, and we want to be increasingly cognizant about what those demands look like. And with that, we're aiming to really co-create this membership involvement structure with extreme care that provides meaningful opportunities for the committee members to really build out their involvement and the type of involvement they're going to engage with. And so as we again move through this development process, it's an opportunity to really define collaboratively what those expectations look like from the membership perspective. Let's go to the next slide. So we're opening it up now, I think, for questions. Is this Sequoia?
Yeah, thanks, Amar. So we will go ahead and open it up to the Q&A, but first I want to apologize to anyone on the line needing Spanish translation. Unfortunately, we've had some technical lapses on our side, and we are not able to get that line up today, but we will work to make sure that in our recording that we include adequate translation, as well as future meetings. So this is one hiccup today, but I wanted to ask Kayla if you would please share with the group on how to raise hands and unmute and participate in the open question and answer period. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Sequoia. Welcome, everybody. So there should be a webinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the hand raised icon. So you can use that if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. That will let us know that you have your hand raised, and then we will call on you and unmute you. If you can use that as soon as you can so that we have time to recognize you in the system. You can also use the questions tab. We prefer that over the chat if possible. And there you can ask a question or put your comment, and us CTC staff will actually read that on your behalf. We'd also appreciate if you can state your name and your affiliation before you make your questions or comments. I think that is it, Sequoia.
Thanks very much.
Sequoia, this is Kayla again. I actually already have a question in the questions tab, if you don't mind me reading that out now. So this is from Carolina Martinez. Apologies if you already said this, but how long are the meetings, and how long do you think it will take to prepare for the meetings?
It's a good question. I guess I could try to answer that. And again, all of this will kind of be dependent as we build this out with members. So in the past, I think experience with committee spaces, we've had anywhere from an hour and a half to up to 3 hours of a membership like meeting. So that could be something realistic for this committee. And I think the preparation time for these meetings from the individual members would be anywhere from like 6 to 10 hours within that quarter. And I think there's opportunity to build out what this looks like with agency staff. And then we'll have an opportunity on a monthly basis to touch in with community advisory members and see if this like time frame works for them, or massaging it a little bit to see what the collective would like to have. So again, I think 3 to 4 sessions for the year, and then 2 sessions with our executive membership teams.
Thanks, Amar. We actually have another question that came into our questions tab. This is from Megan Sanchez. I am concerned about when the meetings will begin and what is the committee using for communication methods. Also, what is a Form 700?
So, okay, go ahead.
I can get this. So yeah, thanks, Megan. We anticipate the meetings to begin sometime in the winter, kind of depending on when we can schedule with committee members and what looks best for all of us. And we will be using, we have a lot of communication tools at our disposal, not at our disposal, at our, we are blessed to have so many communication methods. So we can utilize email, we can utilize phone. If a participant doesn't have internet access, we can share information through the mail, and then they can, find a way to participate in meetings either in person or through a public access computer. We are very flexible in how we communicate. However, I will say that kind of from our past initiatives, we generally use email and this GoToWebinar platform for hosting the meetings because it can be recorded easily, and our staff is pretty well versed on how it works. So this is kind of how it may look unless we're meeting in person. Form 700 is a form that, instead of me trying to struggle through the legalese that is part of it, I will say that on the website, we have a link to a resources guide that has details about kind of this more detailed information around conflict of interest, around Form 700. But basically, it is a, sorry, I saw someone's hand up.
So I put it in there, Sequoia, so folks can look into it, but it's an economic interest form that we all have to acknowledge what we may be connected to from an economic perspective. So all state agency staff at a certain rank have to complete this form, and then members of committee may also have to complete this form. And I think we can have a conversation with any members that are questioning the use and have a maybe discussion about that at that time. I put the link there so people can get a little bit more detailed information. It is collected annually, and again, it's really for transparency in economic interest. I think there's a hand up.
Yeah, I can unmute Hermes Monzon. Hermes, are you there? It looks like you're self-muted. We can hear you.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Hi, yes, good afternoon. My name is, yes, I can, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Hermes Monson. I'm from South San Francisco, and I did have an option to raise my hand when I was listening over the line, so I joined here. One of my, I didn't catch everything. What I'm interested to know is the hours. You said that you will consider to work with the schedule of the participants.
Yes,
the hours for the meetings, like after work.
Yeah, that is correct. So I think
so it's like,
once we have identified or gone through the review process for membership, we'll work to see what hours work best for the entire Equity Advisory Committee, and then start scheduling around those hours. So they may be during the day, they may also be in the evening. It's really dependent on what the collective would like to see. And then those timeframes of those meetings are also up to the collective.
My other question is this going to be considered to have a representation from each area? Like, for example, from each city and other underserved communities? Is that going to be considered during your process of selecting the participants?
Yes, that's something that we're looking at. We're prioritizing membership for communities and people that are historically marginalized or are marginalized by our transportation system, and then also represent a priority population. We know and acknowledge that we're not going to be able to have membership from all of the geographical spaces or representation of communities throughout the state, since this is a body making up of 15 members, but we will be looking at kind of the best geographical breakup and membership bodies so that we have maybe diversity within that membership.
Is this going to be county-wide or is larger than that?
This is a statewide advisory committee.
Oh, it's a statewide. I see. Statewide. All right.
Yeah, so we're looking regionally, and we're using census defined regions as sort of our makeup of how we're looking at regions. And within the application, it'll highlight those areas. And so you'll choose which area kind of more generally you represent, which region. And anyways, I wanted to add that if you missed some of this webinar, anybody on the line that's missed the webinar, this will be recorded and uploaded to our website, so you can check it out later. Additionally, we will be, showing our written answers. We'll have a separate document where you can look at written responses to questions. So we'll do our best to make sure that there's access still to this information after this live webinar.
Thanks, Sequoia. This is Kayla. We do have a few more written questions that came in. So the first one is from Stephen Yoshizumi. Stephen said, I work for WSP USA, a global A&E consulting engineering firm. I frequently work with public agencies to develop transportation projects. Is there an inherent conflict interest due to my employment in the transportation field?
Yeah, this is a great question that I am thinking probably a lot of people are thinking of. And kind of the best response I can give is to consult your own legal representation and kind of think through it. But we really want to highlight that this body, the formation of the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee, is to provide an opportunity for folks who are generally not given kind of the podium within our structures, and have an opportunity to have a voice in a space that has not always been quite as possible. So we really want to make space for that, and that's our intention behind choosing applicants and in our scoring rubric, etc. Amar, Avital, I'm not sure if you want to add in on that response, but I think that's a great and important question.
I think you covered that pretty well. And if you are continuing to have concern about a conflict of interest, you can let us know, maybe where you work or who you represent, and we can also check in with our legal teams to see if that may be an issue, especially if you don't know that answer, you don't have a legal team. So we can definitely get some info there. And if you've already completed your application and still have that question, maybe send us a note via email to just double check with who you work with or your kind of civic connection is with.
And we definitely encourage everyone to still apply, even if you think there may be something. We will, work through that with you, as Amar mentioned, prior to the selection process. So please still apply. There's different ways that we can work together, and we'd still like to hear about what you're doing and be in conversation with you.
Hi, Sequoia. This is Kayla. We do have another question that came in. So this is from Megan Sanchez. What if we bring upon an issue that is not a quick fix? How will this be addressed, and would we be able to make a change?
I mean, I think there may be a lot of questions or concerns that come up from the EAC members, or a lot of things that aren't a quick fix, and so that's where we're really hoping to have really robust engagement from the membership body, so that we can look at opportunities for recommendations on fixing issues or concerns. I think most equity work is very difficult and challenging to have a quick fix answer to. So I think from my perspective, we're welcoming some of the harder questions so that we can really get to solution-oriented approaches and more meaningful outcomes that address equity concerns from community. So I'm not sure if that's a full answer on how to address it, but I think that's going to be part of the development of this committee and what the committee takes on to engage with.
I'll mention too that we're proposing to do some sort of annual report with the committee, and that would be a space to hold ourselves accountable. So if something comes up in the committee and it is a long-term issue to be addressed, that we would have that record in the annual report that this is something that the committee has raised, and we haven't been able to fix it immediately, but it's something that we're aware of and want to keep working toward. And we also want to be responsive if there's something that isn't feasible for us to do or to change, that we want to have that two-way feedback to let the committee and let the public know, that this idea came up and unfortunately it wasn't possible to make the change. We don't want to just say, thank you for your idea and then you never hear from us again on that. We definitely want to be accountable and have that dialogue.
I will add to that, as we get this committee going, while we fully understand that participants will be experts in their field around equity or kind of in the fields that we outlined before, you may not be experts in how the California state transportation agencies work, which is fine. I think we are not looking necessarily for people that already have everything that we are doing under wraps. In fact, we anticipate that because we're really seeking to encourage a broad segment of our equity champions to join us, that we're going to need some time to really go through and just do a deep dive into what these spaces look like. What does Caltrans do? What does the commission do? What does CalSTA do? And give you a basis as committee members to develop recommendations based on an understanding of how our agencies operate, so that you're not just kind of wasting your time and throwing out ideas without having a solid mechanism for kind of understanding our processes. So we fully intend to take the time we need to take to do kind of some base work to establish a foundation of collective understanding of the space that we're in and how we can move, how we're going to be able to move things forward in the future. These are great questions that we ponder every day. Are there any other questions or hands raised, Kayla?
Hi, Sequoia. I'm not seeing any written questions at the moment and no hands raised right now.
Okay.
Oh, I did just receive a written question. This is from Hermes Monzon. How many from the San Francisco Bay Area do you estimate will be selected based on the population?
I think that's a difficult question to answer. I think we will review the applications as they come in, and we want to make sure that there is geographical equity within the applicants. So I can't give, and I don't know if our other team members can give a full hard response, but there's no way to really determine right now what membership looks like from each geographical area, but we do know at least, there will be some representation from these particular areas.
Yeah, I'll add that in addition to geography, we are including other elements like the field that you work in or volunteer in, or your area of expertise, or other kind of identity factors to look into to help us determine like the gaps that we are trying to fill within the body of our committee. So so we'll be looking at geography, but not only geography. We'll be looking at other factors as well.
Thanks, Sequoia. We did receive one more written question. This is from Kim Walton. When the meetings are held in person, where will they be held?
So with the California Transportation Commission meetings, those are held throughout the state. The location changes, and so there would be opportunity most likely for meetings to be held in various locations throughout the state. I'm not sure, sorry, Sequoia, I think you were gonna say something as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that throughout the state, and that we are able to provide travel reimbursements for travel. Any other questions from the audience? We really appreciate you taking the time today to join us, and I think that the open question and answer period is a really helpful process for all of us to kind of think through what you as applicants are thinking about, and try to have a good experience of going through this together.
Hi, Sequoia. I'm not.
Oh, great. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I'm not seeing any hands raised right now, and no more written questions at the moment.
Okay. Well, we have about 5 more minutes left for Q&A, but if there are no more questions, I can give like maybe 1 more minute. We are always open to answer questions offline. In a few slides, we'll have our email that you can, or the email address that you can communicate with us if you think of anything, or you know, you can look at our the web page that we have posted a pretty detailed memo that might answer a lot of these questions as well. And also, please feel free to call us, and the phone number is also listed in a few slides up. So seems like there are no other questions, and I guess we can move on to the next slide.
All right, in closing, what's coming next for this Equity Advisory Committee in our process? We are having the closing date of next Friday, so that's September 2nd at midnight. Please get in your applications. If you have any questions on the application process, you can shoot us an email sending it in. We can help with any kind of formatting. There's also an opportunity for an actual like hard copy if you need that. We can get that to you as well. Our goal is to notify everyone in October on whether you are selected for the EAC. As membership comes in on a weekly basis, we'll go ahead and kind of send out an email saying we received your application, so that you're not kind of waiting in limbo to see if that even went through. We did that last week with the first kind of batch of folks that submitted their application. We also will need to kind of run this through with our exec management team. So in October, we're hoping to finalize that list. And then we'll also look at developing any of our committee materials and having that posted so that folks can engage there. Our frequently asked questions response will be posted within the next week or so that if there's any kind of other questions that arise, we'll take those on and add them here. Any questions from this meeting, we'll add them there. That'll give folks a little bit more time to kind of process, maybe navigate their application process. And so again, just kind of wait out. Maybe by, I think Friday, we'll be posting this. And then again, if there's any unanswered questions still or lingering questions, shoot us an email. Let's go to the next slide. So go ahead. This is our email that we're taking a collective response from. Our phone number here if you have any voice comments or questions, and then Avitel's listed for the mail-in of a hard copy, or if you need to receive a hard copy from us, go ahead and send us the actual hard mailing there. Thank you for all of your questions. We're looking forward to kind of putting this together, putting out the recording. I think our teams will look at the translation for Spanish to also accompany this recording as it goes up onto our website in the next couple of days.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. I suppose we could stay on for a couple more minutes in case anybody has any last questions, but I believe that concludes our webinar for today. So thanks everyone. Megan, did you still have a question? I see you have like a question mark next to your name.
Sequoia, no, she doesn't. She just confirmed in the question tab.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, thanks. Great. Well, hearing none, I think we can end the webinar. Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
admin
you.
team, for your support.